Welcome to the Highly Sensitive Podcast. I'm Lauren LaSalle, and I'm a licensed therapist, highly sensitive person, and HSP coach. This bi-weekly podcast covers information and tips relevant to HSPs, as well as interviews with HSPs and their loved ones. My hope for this podcast is to create a feeling of community, be a supportive place for HSPs, and normalize our experiences as highly sensitive people. Thank you so much for joining me, and let's begin. Welcome to the Highly Sensitive Podcast. I'm Lauren, and I am joined today by both my 6-month-old daughter and one of my cats in this room as I record. So please enjoy the sounds of my daughter making baby noises and my cat purring and possibly rubbing up on the microphone throughout this episode. And I apologize in advance if there are a lot of distracting noises. This is the second time I have tried to record this episode. I do have a lot of support from family who can watch my daughter when I need them, but sometimes you just kind of have to do things when you have time to. So here we are. So before I get into this episode, I wanted to remind you that I am now on Patreon to get support for the podcast. And by joining Patreon, you will be helping me out a lot and ensuring that I'm able to continue putting all of this work into the podcast. There are 3 tiers available with access to ad-free episodes, a private community, getting entered into a drawing to win one-to-one coaching with me, and more. And support starts at as little as $1 a month. You can check it out at patreon.com/highlysensitivepodcast, and I hope to chat with you in our community. The community is the part that I am most excited about for Patreon, so I would love to see you there. Today is also my dad's birthday, so happy birthday, Dad. I was planning on having his episode come out today, but it was my first time actually recording in the same room as someone and not recording on Zoom, and my microphone didn't pick both of us up as well as I would like it to have, so that episode will come out in a few weeks. Today, I'm going to talk about emotions and a few ways that we can work through them. As highly sensitive people, we tend to feel emotions very deeply, and sometimes those emotions can lead to behaviors or thought patterns, or both, that can be unhelpful and not in our best interest. So here are a few strategies to cope with and kind of work through emotions. Ask yourself the question, is this mine or does it belong to someone else? And this is a question that I started asking myself a few years ago after meeting with certain clients and noticing that I tended to take on how they were feeling, such as feeling the weight of depression after our sessions. I started checking in with myself during sessions as well when I felt that I was starting to take on feelings from my clients. And when I acknowledged that this feeling didn't belong to me, it belonged to them, then I would take a few deep breaths to try to let it go and release it from my body. I also found it helpful to take a break for 5 to 10 minutes after sessions just to color and let my brain process things from the previous session, which kind of helped me reset myself in a way. So if you are in some type of job where you're interacting with people and you find that it's really draining or you feel like you're taking on their emotions, if you're able to have a couple minutes to yourself in between interactions, I think that can be really, really helpful. When you're experiencing an emotion, identify the emotion. Ask yourself, what emotion am I experiencing? Put a name to it. Then identify the cause if you can. Why am I feeling this way? What triggered the feeling? And is this mine or someone else's? This should all be done as non-judgmental noticing, which means that you might think something along the lines of, I'm noticing that I'm feeling irritable, without judging yourself or the emotion. For this example, I'll say that I'm noticing that I'm feeling irritable because I haven't eaten for a while, and I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that. Now that I've named the feeling and the cause, I can see if there are any steps that I can take to help myself in the moment. Yes, I can go get something to eat. So the 3 steps are, number 1, identify how you're feeling. What emotion am I experiencing? Number 2, identify the cause. What triggered the feeling? Number 3, is there anything that I can do to help myself in the moment? I think it's important to acknowledge that feelings don't always accurately represent reality, and I like to say all feelings are valid, but not always accurate. Feelings are not facts. They are how we are responding to a situation, and how we feel affects both our thoughts and our behaviors. If you find that you're often feeling a certain way, and this is something that I especially like to do with therapy clients who are experiencing feelings of depression and anxiety, keep track of what situations tend to trigger these emotions and what thoughts go along with it to see if there is some sort of pattern when you're feeling a certain way. And writing all of this down can be helpful so you can refer to it later and really notice those patterns. Notice how you speak to yourself when feeling that way. Are these thoughts helpful or unhelpful? Do these thoughts end quickly or do they cause you to spiral? You can even keep track of what thoughts you have when you're feeling happy or excited. Notice how the content of your thoughts changes with the different emotions that you experience. When we feel an emotion that we don't want to experience, such as intense anxiety, we sometimes want to push it away, but what can be helpful is actually accepting that you're feeling anxious or whichever emotion you're experiencing. What information does this tell you about your current situation or what you're thinking about? If you ever feel really stuck in a feeling, remind yourself that it will pass and you won't feel this way forever. Once you've kept track of your thoughts, or if you are able to notice when you're having unhelpful or negative thoughts, you can try to challenge these thoughts. Write down the thought along with evidence that it is true and evidence that it is not true. If the negative thought has to do with someone else, could there be another explanation for the person's behavior that has nothing to do with you? For example, maybe you recently messaged a friend to try to get together soon and they haven't responded yet. You might be thinking they don't want to be friends with me anymore, or maybe they're upset with me, maybe I did something wrong, when the real reason might be that they've been busy and aren't checking their messages. A strategy that a lot of my clients have found helpful is asking yourself, what would I tell a friend in this situation? We tend to speak to ourselves much more negatively and harshly than we would speak to a friend, so pretend that one of your friends is in your situation and think about what you would say to them, and then say it to yourself. Breathing exercises, guided imagery, and meditation, which I have covered in previous episodes, as well as doing something active such as walking, dancing, or yoga, or even running cold water over your hands, wrists, and face can all help if you feel like you need to ground, recenter, or get unwanted energy out of your body. I hope this has been helpful, and as always, if you have any ideas for episode topics, if you have any questions for me to answer on the podcast, or if you would like to write an email sharing your story for me to read on the podcast, you can email me at lauren@laurenlasallecoaching.com. You can find out more about my coaching programs, as well as resources and links to my social media by visiting my website at laurenlasallecoaching.com. Before I sign off, I will leave you with a quote. Emotion can be the enemy. If you give into your emotion, you lose yourself. You must be at one with your emotions because the body always follows the mind. Bruce Lee. Thank you so much for listening to the Highly Sensitive podcast. You can help support the show by taking a minute to rate and review it, share a favorite episode with a friend, or go to patreon.com/highlysensitivepodcast.